Welcome back to the Kingsway Podcast.
Welcome.
You're here.
And that means you're here. Great.
You're listening. You're paying attention. And Ryan and I are ready. Locked and loaded. I don't know.
And locked.
This
is going to be an episode that's sort of a hybrid of different stuff we've done. We don't always do Bible stuff. We don't always do faith stuff. But we do a lot of the times. Sometimes when we do that, it's a Sunday study hall. We're going deeper on the whatever.
Yeah.
Is this a Sunday study hall?
It's kind of like Matthew's Sunday study hall. I would say it's something like that. I feel like...
Let's make it Sunday study hall.
We can just make it a Sunday study hall.
Bam!
So this rarely happens in the way that I feel like it's about to happen, but because of the way that the sermon went this last Sunday,
which
Father's Day 2025.
Sunday, yep, it was June 15th.
Yep, and I used a very particular story as the main gist of things, but then an example at the very end, and I just didn't feel like I gave it its flushed out fullness version.
It's a story that has a lot more to it. That's like the exact recipe for Sunday study hall.
It is,
and we normally do.
I got done. It was, I thought, helpful in the way that we used it, but it wasn't. It's Luke 6, and it's a story that it's in multiple Gospels, so it's not just in one. And the thing about anytime we do one of these, like Sunday study hall style things, is I just wish I had a little bit more time to get a little nerdy and to talk about things and flush things out.
You said Luke 7.
Luke 7.
Yep, there we go.
So sorry. And the reason that I say that is because sometimes when you tell a story on the surface, there is a very simplistic, easy to understand point that actually is helpful to learn, but then there's so much going on in the backstory. And the easiest way that I have to like digest this in our culture is like when you start learning more about like the Marvel universe or like the Lord of the Rings universe, and you start knowing more about what's going on than just the surface level story. Even though the narrative in the story is awesome, there's so much more. Perfect example of this that I was teaching my kids. We just watched Infinity War for the first time a few weeks ago,
and then Endgame.
Okay, and there's this beautiful moment, of course, where after Infinity War and the start of Endgame, right? There's that transition. Well, there's also a massive transition from Civil War into Infinity War. Mm-hmm. And so because the kids hadn't seen that...
These are going to be full spoilers,
yes, by the way. But it's really not, because it's right at the beginning of Infinity War. Mm-hmm. But when Steve Rogers shows up for the first time in Infinity War and Vision is being attacked with Wanda and they're trying to get... I think it's called the what stone is that? The Mind Stone.
The Mind Stone.
And two of the characters that are attacking them are Goblin and then I cannot remember
that witchy
her name.
Lady.
It's the woman with the purple eyes and purple mascara.
Purple Lady.
But anyway, both of them wield weapons that are the same caliber of what is going to be Stormbreaker, that is ultimately a god killer. And so the idea behind that, if you know that, is Thor's hammer is only able to be wielded by those that are worthy, all right? Mm-hmm. Well, a god weapon is only capable of being wielded by someone that is strong enough to hold it. And in fact, when one of the other characters asks, why don't we all just get a Stormbreaker? He's like, it would fracture your soul. Because Star-Lord's like, oh, well, I'm like half god. You know, he's like, nah, it would crush your soul. Well, Steve Rogers catches the spear when it's thrown at him and then throws it.
And the lady, when he catches it, is shocked.
And then throws it to Black Widow, who then sweeps her leg. And it is wild because you're like, wait a second. Because you remember when they picked up the hammer, she's the only one that goes, I don't need to know.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's super nerdy, right?
Yep.
So if you don't know that in that scene, it just looks like, they're throwing a spear around, and that's kind of cute. No.
But it's so much more.
No, it's so much more, and it means so much more to the characters because, spoiler alert here, if you've not watched those two, when she ultimately dies for the stone, Black lady. That's why she's like the worthy sacrifice, is because she's just like Steve Rogers when he goes down in the plane. Anyway, super cool background.
I'm a nerd, and I'd literally never heard.
You never heard?
Before.
Okay,
Nope.
super cool background.
I love this episode already.
So anyway, there's so much cool stuff to it, and this particular section in Luke 7 is one of those. And here's why it's one of my favorites. And this is a quick spoiler, but I said this on Sunday. This particular story is with a centurion. Yes. And the centurions are a unique, basically a rank of soldier or a particular position of soldier in the Roman army, a very well-respected position of authority, and a very, very talented soldier and skilled warrior. And
yeah, I don't really know modern military ranks, so I couldn't make a good comparison.
Yeah,
but
I'd have to ask.
Here's the basic thing you need to know. They're named a centurion in the same way that we name 100 years a century.
Yeah.
So they're a soldier in charge of 100 approximately soldiers.
Yeah.
If some of them are sick or on leave or whatever. I don't know how Roman military works. But they're that kind of rank where they're over about 100 soldiers. So it's like I don't know. I'm not about to throw out military ranks that I know nothing about.
It'd be comparable to a captain, is what it's saying, or a non-commissioned officer like a first sergeant. The only thing I'll tell you too is though every soldier in the Roman army was like they were trained to a level that like a centurion, for example, most Roman soldiers they were trained to be able to defend like a 10 by 10 foot square by up to I think 20 men. So like they wanted to be able to like defend that area, and so these guys are what we would say is a very well respected, very high level or mid level, but very much so a like boots on the ground, actually seeing combat, actually in charge of soldiers type of a position. Now, if that's not cool enough in the sense of like the complexities of like Israel is being occupied by Rome, so this is not necessarily someone that you would think is going to be on the Jesus team as just a whole, just because technically Rome is against Israel and is kind of its overlord. And then on top of that, there's this wild line that Jesus says at the end of the story, and it says that he was amazed at his faith.
Yeah.
And so this is the only time in Jesus's ministry in all four Gospels, this story, when Jesus is amazed at someone else's faith. And it just happens to be a soldier for the conquering army of the Romans, of the occupying conquering army, which to me is wild. It would be very much so, I mean, this would be a wild scenario, but it would be very much so if like a captain from the Chinese army came to see me or you, and we were blown away at their faith.
In case you're not catching the weird allegiance play going on here, you're like, oh, a captain. I know captains in the, or I can conceive of knowing a captain in the Army or the Marines or whatever. Maybe their ranks are different, so maybe I'm wrong there. Again, this is like a captain for an opposing, more than opposing. If we had a captain from a Chinese, from the Chinese military
because
here,
they took over the United States.
Yeah. Because they took over the United States and then had this faith interaction, that's about what it would be like. So I want to read something out of my the NIV Zondervan Archaeological Study Bible put together by Trinity Evangelical Divinity School.
Yeah.
I say all that to say they know what they're talking about.
Yep.
Beginning of chapter 7, it has this footnote that talks about the centurion. It says, the centurion was probably a member of Herod Antipas's forces, who were organized in Roman fashion, often in companies of 100 men.
Yep.
That means that he's probably one of the soldiers under the local leader and not necessarily directly under the orders of the emperor. Yes, if the emperor says something, you're doing it. But like his local oversight is Herod Antipas. Who is that? Well, there are a bunch of Herods in the New Testament. There's a Herod, kind of the granddaddy Herod before Jesus or any of that. And then Herod Antipas's dad was the guy who ordered the execution of Jewish kids that would have got Jesus.
Yep.
If they didn't flee
In
to
Bethlehem.
Egypt.
Mhm.
Yep. So that was this guy's dad.
Okay.
Jesus and his family came back after that Herod the Great died. Herod the Great's power goes down, like most kings and other leaders, to his heirs.
Yep.
It's inherited by his heirs. And there are a few different Herods who inherit different parts of his. The daycare keeps getting calls. And they're going right to my phone. I think somebody's calling me.
That's hilarious.
So it goes to a few different Herods. There's a Herod in Jerusalem who's going to interact with Jesus, and Samaria and some other places who's going to interact with Jesus when he's on trial and some other times.
Yep.
There's a Herod Agrippa later who interacts with Paul in Jerusalem.
Yep.
But the Herod Jesus could be interacting with in Galilee is Herod Antipas. This is the Herod that beheaded John the Baptist.
That's wild.
So what you see by that is two things. One, not allegiant to Jesus or the good of the Jews in any way. Not that those are necessarily the same side. What they think is the same side.
Yep.
Also, highly politically swayed and motivated to do, so like the whole beheading of John the Baptist is like, hey, happy birthday, here's your military parade kind of birthday party, Herod Antipas. Here's your brother's daughter.
Yep.
She's going to do a very special, awkward dance for you. And you like it so much that you tell her you'll do whatever she wants, up to half of your wealth.
Yep.
That's insane. That's creepy.
Yep.
That's
and then
weird.
your brother's wife is
That's
going
grimy.
to ask for the head of John the Baptist.
Yeah. And so she asks for the head of John the Baptist. And so he has him executed. He's like, oh, I didn't want to, but and kills him. That's like the grimiest I can think of a leader. I'm sure that it can get way worse, but like that guy is his soldier.
Leader. Yep.
His commander of 100 soldiers is talking to Jesus with this level of respect and recognition of authority when his boss killed Jesus' cousin of similar respect and authority in the community, notoriety in the community.
And that's what's I think wild about this, because if you haven't read the story in a while, and though we're alluding to like this faith and the amazement, like it is crazy knowing that background, what occurs in this section, because we have it in I think Mark's gospel as well, and in Mark's gospel it's a little bit more of like
tell me the reference when
I
you
think
see
it's or it's Matthew 8, and I think in Matthew's gospel there's a little bit of a discrepancy here, and I we won't mention that because we are in the Sunday study hall. In Matthew's gospel, the centurion himself comes to Jesus, and in Luke's gospel, it's the servants.
I don't think he ever sees Jesus in Luke's, because he's always two or three separate times.
Two or three. I think it's two separate times he sends different guys. Yeah. And I think that's the discrepancy is easy to say this, that there seems to be either Matthew is just alluding to it in the same way of like a centurion came to Jesus. Well, representation or representatives of the centurion would be similar, but in the sense of like the interactions was submitting himself to Jesus's authority, but not necessarily in presence. Inside presence, but it is a little bit tricky to navigate that in the sense that like obviously Matthew is telling it from whatever he has heard or he has seen, but then you get Luke's account, which he is writing to Theophilus, who is of Roman origin as well, and so the Roman stories would be really wanting, like he wants detail, which Luke also is.
He wants accuracy,
very detail oriented.
Honestly, so. Both the Luke one is probably more what actually happened, I'm guessing. Could be either way. But if they're different, if one happened and one didn't, it could be that the Roman centurion never seeing Jesus face to face is him trying to save face with the powers that be. Because by the time that's written down, Jesus has been executed by the state. For one reason, calling himself the king of the Jews, which Herod thought he was, which the Roman emperor told Herod that he was, and which threatened Rome's thumb of power crushing that area. And so a centurion being like, yeah, I'm pretty chill with that other guy who's trying to claim power. Yeah.
And I think when you also look at the actual questions and things that Jesus has asked, it's almost verbatim, word for word, what's being asked and how the centurion responds. It's just either a message from his servants in Luke or from his own mouth, it appears in Matthew. But the heart of what is occurring is the exact same.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's really important to say too. So here's obviously the conundrum. So in Luke's gospel, we get all these details where this guy has a reputation for being for the Jewish community, has even donated money to help the synagogue be built in that town in Capernaum. And so in Luke's gospel, we get this example of him like actually going to the elders first and like asking almost permission or help from them to go and talk to this, which is an interesting thing because I'm wondering if these elders, unlike some teachers of the law, are actually a little bit more pro-Jesus. It kind of alludes to that, where he's
in Capernaum, which is in Galilee. That's closer to where he grew up, which actually doesn't lend credibility to that because they did not like him.
And what's wild is John Coward preached a message on the 2 times that Jesus was amazed. And the one time he was amazed at this faith, and the other one was the lack of faith from his hometown. Yeah. So it's just what's wild. So anyway, the thought process though behind this is that there seems to be some sort of a potential conversion or close to conversion transformation that's gone on in this centurion's life, that he is connected to the Jewish community, that he's either a sympathizer or has had some sort of
religious experience.
Yes. And so as this goes on, now what's wild about this story is the ability for him to understand how authority works.
Yeah.
And I think that's always been, it's a little bit of a tricky understanding, but so before the time of cell phones, Ryan, you remember before the time of cell phones? Can you
What's that?
barely remember?
No, yeah, I can. I didn't have a cell phone until I was in high school.
You had to, you had this thing where like I would travel on my bike, you know, this is back before I had my license, 20-ish, 25-ish.
It was last millennia?
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
It's 1,000 years ago.
But this weird thing would happen where you would leave and you would go somewhere like the library, you'd go to, 7-Eleven or something, and you would have to make decisions without asking permission because you didn't have the ability to call and be like, hey, can I check real quick if I can do this? And so what they would say is, do you have permission? Does your mom know you're going to do this? Does your dad know you're going to do this? And then you would either lie, stretch the truth, or flat out have like yes or no. Like you'd be like, nope, I did not tell my parents. And there was times that I remember very specifically, like that was especially at the library, because you would bring the card and it was her card. It wasn't my card. And so I would check these out and go, does your mom know that you're checking these cards? And I'd be like, yes. And then I would show them the thing and they would go, okay. She didn't have to be there. She didn't have to sign off on anything. She didn't have to know anything. They just knew that if I had the card, if I had her password, or if I had her, the debit card or whatever, the Blockbuster card, that really dates me, then I could get the thing. And I think for whatever reason, spiritually, there's just some sort of like block in our, I don't know if it's our ability to understand how God works, or out of sight, out of mind, or, the thought of like Jesus still being in control without being present in the physical scene way, that I think oftentimes undermines his authority, if that makes sense.
What this story reminds me of, and specifically the authority part, is I'm pretty sure it's the Gerasene demoniac, who the demon from within this man sees Jesus. Jesus is walking incognito around so many cities, and he'll open his mouth, start healing and preaching, and people will be like, oh, Jesus. But he walks up to this demon-possessed guy, and the demon within this person is like, Jesus, what are you doing here? Are you here to torture me again? And I'm sure everybody walking with him is like, who are you talking about?
Yeah.
But the being furthest, who should be furthest from Jesus, literally on the opposite side of the spiritual battle they're in. It like he fold 10 huts and salutes Like,
he knows exactly who he is.
It's to me, it's like now with the soldier, it's more like rank and authority, and you have the authority to do these things. But with that demon, it's more like most John Wayne movies. He walks in the saloon, and there's the piano and the dancing and the drinking, whatever, and it all stops. And you just hear like glasses clattering and otherwise silence. And everybody's just looking at the door. That's the kind of like respect, sure, but like authority, recognition of power kind of stuff that goes with this authority that the centurion's talking about. So that leads me to the question, what does this centurion know? What has he seen? Is it just on the word of the elders? What happened to draw him to hold so much credibility from the word of the elders of the people that he's subjugating?
You are hitting the nail on the head of why I wanted to talk about this, because here's what
happened.
It's so cool in the story because he sends his servants, he goes to the elders, then before Jesus can even get to his house, it appears some way they interact on the road to his house, and he has this message, and he says, I too am a man of authority. You just got to say the word, and I know it'll be done, just like the way I command my troops. You have the authority to heal, right? So it's like you don't have to get here to fix this. You can just done, right? Now, here's what's wild. We don't have his conversion story.
Nope.
We don't know if he knows that Jesus is the Son of God or some sort of agent of God. We don't know. He doesn't confess.
We don't know
any of that.
If he's like a secret Jewish convert, but there's no Jesus religion yet.
Yeah.
It's Judaism, and Jesus is a Jewish teacher, but kind of branching off on some ideas and whatever. There's no like, he's already a Christian, so of course he knows. He doesn't know.
No, maybe.
In that formal, didactic kind of way.
And so what most sticks out to me about these two texts and why it was worth talking about is what is left out.
Yeah.
So here's why this is weird to me. The centurion doesn't quote a Bible verse. The centurion doesn't talk about faith that trusts necessarily in God for everything. The centurion doesn't repent of anything it doesn't say I'm unholy or anything like that.
He doesn't give evidence for belief.
No. And all he does is accurately understand who Jesus is by recognizing his authority. Mm-hmm. And Jesus goes, that's the best kind of faith. I'm astonished, but I am in admiration is what that word translates, to be amazed. Yeah. It's like admiration, not shock. He is like a father watching a son do something just amazing. He is so proud of him. And that, to me, the simplicity of that, because he says, in all of Israel, I've never found such faith. I'm just blown away. Are we overshooting? Are we missing the mark by even sometimes how we measure what quality of faith looks like? I don't know. That's where my mind just kind of just breaks a little because I don't know. He's going to have moments with the teachers of the law just a few chapters later where they know all the Bible verses. They've done all the holy practices. They are above board. They're doing the ceremonial washings. They're doing the feasts and the sacrifices and all the stuff. And he's like, you're whitewashed tombs. It's worthless. Yeah. And it's almost like it would be better for us to just say, I know nothing and Jesus is everything, than to claim any kind of thing that we have earned or deserve in our faith. And I don't know if that tension sometimes is flushed out as much as it should be, if that makes sense. I just don't know if it is. What tension do you feel when you hear that? Because, I mean, when you see it's the only time Jesus is amazed, but there's no repentance and there's no declaration of belief. There's no submission to him as Lord. It's just a submission of his authority.
Yeah. It's, I think, a few things. One, this is so close to satire, like Saturday Night Live or whatever, or like political cartoons or whatever, where it's like, nothing's the way it should be.
Yeah.
Everybody with Jesus is like, he's our teacher. And this random military leader from the other side is like, sir. So it makes me think that. It makes me feel like pretty much saying the same thing, but like the furthest people from Jesus are the ones who see him the clearest. The people closest are the ones. So like all the disciples, they'll see him feed the 5,000. Or in, I think Matthew's gospel has the feeding of the 5,000 and then another mass feeding of 4,000. Maybe it's Luke, maybe it's Matthew.
Yeah.
And after the first one, they're still like, so how are you going to feed all these people? And you're like, where were you? Were you on like coming to work over Zoom or something? Like, how did you miss that he has that superpower? That's a bad explanation for what it is, but like.
That connects exactly where I'm going because here's what I was thinking about. Obviously, I preach my best sermons after I get done preaching, get home, and get in the shower. That's when my best sermons come. So the apostles and the disciples that are with Jesus are going to miss that he is the Son of God and is the Messiah because they are going to misalign and misunderstand how he is going to do it.
Yeah.
And they are not going to ultimately trust in him. They're going to trust in his plan. And so they're trusting him to like, we're going to storm the Capitol. We're going to storm Jerusalem. We're going to put you on the throne and you're going to make it all right again. Yeah. And ultimately, what do they think he's going to bring but authority over Rome?
Yeah.
And this is a Roman centurion walking up to Jesus in front of them and going, I know you outrank me.
Yeah.
Satire? It's wild to me. To me, I'm like, this is where like you just wonder like later, like when like Matthew or Luke is like trying to get this story out of them where they're like connecting this. Yeah. They're like, maybe we should have leaned in and listened a little bit more to when he was talking about this authority because that was like really important and we didn't pay attention to what was being said.
It's either that or they have some framework this fits inside of in their minds that we don't have.
Yeah.
They're thinking about it in a certain way. And so they leave out details that are like, yeah, everybody knows this. And we 2,000 years later are like, knows what?
Yeah.
What are we supposed to know? And we're missing out. But it still leaves this really cool mystery in the story element that blows me away. And we see a few other centurions in the New Testament.
We do.
Or if it's not centurions, it's like single Roman military personnel or law enforcement personnel. So like the Philippian jailer and some other people. We see the like honor and respect they have for their own country and their own side and the threat that they feel if they were going to back away from that. So the Philippian jailer, the walls break down because the Holy Spirit does it. And then Paul and whoever else can leave.
Silas.
Paul and Silas can leave. And they're like, this jailer is going to kill himself because he's like, I have no honor. If they come back, they'll probably kill me anyway. And they're like, no, we're not going anywhere. We'll stay.
Dude.
That's the thing that shocks him out of.
Well, and I don't know if you remember, too, when Jesus dies on the cross, there's Roman soldiers that are watching. The first confession of a Roman soldier is instantly after his death, and it literally records it, I believe, in Matthew, but I could be wrong. Might be Luke, where it says, he says, surely this was the Son of God. And, like, it says, a centurion. So, like, I think why, and I think what you pointed out is really important, why this matters more than we realize is because of what a centurion represented inside the Roman. This is the working dog. This is the main dude. This is the guy that, like, when they show up with a bunch of centurions, that means they got 1,000. Legion is 10, or 1,000 men with 10 centurions. Like, there's only 10 of these guys, you know what I mean, potentially in charge of a legion. And so this is a rare group, but a very common, like, what they would astound to say, like, this is the guy that gets the work done. You lost your country because of a bunch of centurions. Like, the reason you're not able to take it back is because of the centurion. Like, you know, so, like, this is a symbolic representation of their authority, of Rome's authority and their power. And I think that's part of why when this story goes down, it feels so, like you said, backwards, like where you're just like, this guy just walks up potentially, and it's just like, I got this guy that's sick, and I know you're the man I need to talk to.
Yeah. It also reminds me of, so like there's one of these in Matthew, we just talked about Matthew 8 or 9 or something.
8.
And it reminds me of Matthew 4, Jesus tempted in the desert. One of the temptations is Satan saying, bow to me and I'll give you all the kingdoms of the earth.
Yep.
What does that sound like? Bow to me and you'll have authority.
Yep.
Like military, political authority over all the kingdoms of the earth.
Yep.
I don't know how much, this is a really interesting topic, but we don't have time to get into it. I don't know how much foreknowledge or like omniscience Jesus had walking around as a human.
Yeah, we've talked about that before. It's a tough question.
Did he know? I mean, he could have known. Like, yeah, that's a benefit. If I give in to you, that's a benefit that I already have.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are people so far from me, not on my side, who already are going to bow to me the moment they see me.
Yeah.
Like the Centurion, like the Gerasene demoniac,
Yep.
etc. Which
like John in the womb. John
the
in the womb.
Gerasene demoniac uses military language.
Yeah.
The Centurion is over a centuria. I said earlier 100. That's like an approximation. It's like 60 to 160,
Yeah.
maybe 80 most normally.
It's the commanding officer
Yeah.
of the largest unit, or the like largest, I would say, collections of soldiers.
Yeah.
So
But the demon in that says, I am legion for we are many. That's like a general above a captain. Again, don't judge me. I don't actually know military ranks. But it's like the next level up above captain, but not just for human military occupiers, but for like evil spiritual. I don't know how that works in
unforeseen
ranks,
forces,
but
yep.
like, yeah, that's a rank up. And he's like, you could take me with one arm tied behind your back. Is pretty much what he says.
well, and I mean, it's just, this goes just to so many cool things, because it'd be a cool study. And if you're watching this, just track the word authority through the New Testament, because it's everywhere. Who gives you the authority to forgive sins?
All authority on heaven and earth has been given to me.
The end of Matthew is he taught, or Matthew 7 is he taught with one
one who had authority.
There's so many moments where authority just gets thrown out there as like this thing, but it's like, why does authority matter? And it's because authority is basically like, I'm in charge of, I'm over top of, I have the ability to do this, right? And it's also one of those things that, like, when Pilate is trying to convince Jesus to declare his innocence, he's like, don't you realize I have your life in my hands? And he's like, no, the only authority you have has just been given to you
by my Father
in heaven. And it's like,
power move.
What? Like,
I've heard that from some pastors' kids. Hey, stop eating out of that cookie jar. Any authority given to you has been given to you from my Father in the big office.
And it's just funny how that authority word, though, just like flows through the New Testament. And then you do get to the end of Matthew, where he's like, look, all authority on heaven and earth has been given to me.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that it's given, because this is the thing right now where the centurion's declaring he has it. All right. But then Philippians tells us that he lays it down to get on the cross. Right. And then it doesn't get taken from him. He lays it down, but then the Father places it back on top of him. And it's also something that's in Genesis, where Adam and Eve are actually given authority to
have
dominion above it. So,
which is benevolent dominion. It's not iron-fisted, twist all of this for your sick pleasure. It is like, use your authority and be in charge of all this stuff to help it flourish.
Yep. Which is exactly what Jesus is going to do.
Yeah.
Again, he's going to give us the Great Commission, which is go and do what I've commanded you to do, which sounds like a military term. Again,
here's your marching orders.
Here's your objective. So I think in my mind, when I was listening to the sermon back and I was listening to some of the things, I was just wishing that we had more time to flush some of this out.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like it's more linchpinny than I realized, and it makes more sense to me once you hear that he uses that authority word, that how much like Pilate didn't get it, his disciples didn't get it, no one understood it until the minute he gave his life up on the cross, and then the soldiers immediately got it, and then Jesus is using the same language to declare the kingdom. Yeah. So it just clicked for me.
I really loved how you used this story to help explain the childlike faith thing. So you talked about the kid giving the fish and the loaves to Jesus to multiply for the feeding of the 5,000, and how simple and honest and authentic his faith was. And it's not just about those buzzwords, but it's like it's exactly what Corey Asbury meant in the song Reckless Love when he uses reckless. He had a lot of people get upset at him, and there are churches who refuse to sing that song because of that one word. I get it if you refuse to sing that song or songs from him or other people because they're associated with Bethel and they have all their whatever. We can have that conversation another day. But because of that one word, because they're like, God's not uncalculated.
Yeah.
And that's not exactly what they're saying.
Yeah.
What Corey's saying is not considering your own pain too highly.
Yeah.
Sort of. So God, at great personal sacrifice,
Yes.
loved us. That's what he means by reckless love. And that's what I think childlike faith is in one way is not counting the pain that you could endure as part of the weight of if you should do it or not. So that's kind of what the centurion looks like. It's like childlike faith in just flat obedience, in like quick to do the right thing. There's got to be better ways to say that, but like he's not sitting around and needlessly rolling it over in his head. What should I do? He's like, I'm going to go to the guy who can do it. And it's not blind faith, but it's strong faith in a superior.
Yeah.
So a lot of children, if they like get a scraper or whatever, and they're not around their parent, they go find their parent. They're like, fix this.
Yep.
They're not like, can you fix this? What tools do you have? They're like, fix this.
Yep.
Kind of having total faith that either their parent will, or they know who to go to. They know when it's bad enough that they should take them to the hospital or just pull out the first aid kit. It's this like, you're the guy.
I need your help because I don't know what to do, and this is above my pay grade, above my rank, above my responsibility, above my ability to change. And that's part of the reason, like, this illustration, I think, flies so perfectly with that feeding of the 5,000 in John 6 is because there is a limitation to what we can do with our given authority, our given resources, our given talents and abilities and power. And so that, of course, feeding the 5,000 reveals that very quickly, where Jesus is like, I can just do this and just snap my fingers and here's a bunch of food. Yeah. But then in this one, it's the exact opposite, where this centurion appears to have this situation that's far from Jesus, that is above his pay grade, that's above his, and he's bringing it to the feet of Jesus, and he's like, I need help. And what I love about the story, and I did point this out to a degree, but what I love about the story is he never demands it. He just says, you have the ability if you would choose to. He asks for it, but he doesn't go like, do this. Like he's like,
as if he has authority over Jesus.
He never demands it, never says you have to do this. He just says you can. I know you can.
Yeah.
And it's for another person. It's leveraging his faith for another person, which is a whole nother crazy part of the story, which is the guy that got healed, even a believer in Jesus. We don't know. We don't know anything about that guy.
Did he even know who Jesus was?
We don't know his name. We don't know anything about his story. We don't know any of that. And he's just like, yeah, he'd be a good person to heal because I love him and he matters to me. And I know you have the power. Like, that is such a kingdom idea of like faith-filled things. You know, Jesus says this another time when a guy's lowered in front of him. And Jesus literally says, the faith of your friends, because of their faith, you're healed. And, you know, at first you're like, well, that's wild. Like, what does that mean? Well, it seems to me that Jesus takes in other people's faith for people that need it. Like, I mean, it really does, which is, I mean, that's hard to say. Like, obviously we all have our own journeys of faith. We have our own, you know, moments of like, I would call salvations or like rescuing and an invitation to actually sit at the table. But it also reveals that God listens to his kids and wants to help them, especially when they're in the ability of restoration, healing, and bringing hope to others. Like, that's just something that naturally flows out of us, and it naturally flows out of him, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Super cool.
I love this story.
It's really good. Well, thanks so much for listening. If I found that encouraging, give us any comments or send us some emails if there was a part of this that you enjoyed or a part that stuck out to you. Or maybe we missed something that you know that we didn't know. And if you need to correct any of our Marvel theology to start out with, just make sure you send that to Ryan so I get it right.
Yep. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, we know that you have the authority.
Yes.
You can like and subscribe and help us make our way up in the world through the algorithm or whatever.
Well,
I want to say this last thing. You can't see this if you're just listening to the podcast. I am putting on my hat that I had at the beginning. And that means we're about to record a second episode. It probably won't come out till mid-July or sometime that I'm not here. One of us isn't here.
But we're on the hype train for it.
We mentioned at the turn of the 200th episode that I'm going to do a coffee episode.
I'm about to get schooled up.
We're about to automatically go from speed 1 to speed 1.3 or 1.5. So if you're going to listen to that episode in about a month or whatever, I'd slow it down. You're going to need it. Over time, you'll need to keep slowing it down.
Well, and I will say, if you watch the coffee episode, I would highly encourage you to go to YouTube and check our channel out because I think the visuals of it would be really fun. It will still be informational if you're listening to it or whatever, but I think you'll enjoy the video of it just as much. Hey, if you've listened thus far, thanks so much for paying attention and giving us your ears and being curious. We always love to learn here, and we continue to do that, and I think that's the future of this podcast is continue to have that vision and hopefully bring you guys along for the journey and the ride. So,
come learn with us.
Absolutely. Well, have a great and glorious day in the Lord. We'll see you later.
See ya.